This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Organic farming, demons, devils, and dragons. Kind of an odd combination, but that's what's happening here this weekend as we record this. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me is one of the organizers of an event that I was honored to be invited to speak at here in Valley City, North Dakota, which I have been through, but not for 45 years, and it was on my way to my grandparents' farm in the center of the state. This is the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering, and joining us here, again, one of the organizers, Wyatt Furnow. Wyatt, thank you for inviting me up here. I really appreciate it.
Glad to have you here, and so is everybody that's come to this event so far. So it's we keep hearing such great things of thank you for bringing Derek Gilbert. So.
Before we get too far along here, Wyatt reminded me just before we started, so credit for him to remind, as we're recording this, October 28th, it is Sharon's birthday, so happy birthday, sweetheart.
Happy birthday.
Thank you for letting me come here to the land of my ancestors, and hope you're enjoying the chocolate cake, and I will see you very soon. The gathering here is really an interesting mix. I mean, setting aside the fact that you invited this fringe Christian to come talk about Genesis 6 paradigms, so giants and Nephilim and demons and dragons. But here, just you look around the room, you've got like homemade dog treats, you've got organic seeds, you've got the basically non-GMO, sustainable farming techniques.
Yes.
What is the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering?
Well, we're a variety show, so we're a show that, for the most part, we're an all-American show with neighbors helping neighbors. So it's a way to share sometimes a lot of lost values. So canning used to be something that everybody did. People would go down to their cellar, grab some meat, bring it up. Neighbors would come over. They could open up some meat, add some rice. They had an instant meal, no refrigerator. And it actually tastes better than the meat we have today. So it's a way to show people, the lost ways of the world, how to be self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. So tough times come. Can you survive? Can you garden? Can you can? Can you can without vinegar? What is fermenting? How do you ferment food? Things I never even knew existed, but our grandparents and our ancestors, they did this stuff for years, and that's how they survived. And people can say, well, you can die of botulism, but you can die of a lot of things. You can get salmonella, right from your local grocery stores. So right. I guess you could be fearful of it, but that's the way people have done it for tens of well, I should say hundreds of years, I guess we could say. But how did the ancient Israelites, how did they make their bread? How did they make their yeast? How did they survive? How did the Native Americans survive these cold winters? And they did it. And a lot of times we're dependent on the grocery store, but there's other alternatives. Grocery store is good, mm-hmm. But if you can be self-sufficient and do some of it on your own and not have something that looks like a chemistry experiment on the side of your label.
Right.
And it's healthy.
That's the thing that I think most of us don't realize. And I suffer from the obstacle of having been raised in the city of Chicago. So I mean, you're raised in a big city. You come to depend on the corner grocery store. Where does milk come from? Yeah, it comes from the grocery store up on the corner. It never occurred to me until just the last few years, now that we live out in the Ozarks. We are outside the city. We're not just a few minutes away from the police. The police are tens of minutes away.
That's right.
If need be. If power goes out, where do we get our water? How do we eat if the freezer loses power for too long? It never occurred to me, but you're right. What our grandparents did, we today would call prepping.
Yes. Yep.
My grandparents in the middle of North Dakota, outside the town of Harvey in Wells County, my mother told me they would have to do things like in the wintertime to take care of the cattle. You tie a rope from the back door of the house to the barn. Right. Because if a storm kicks up and you get lost between the house and the barn, you could die.
Right.
For a kid growing up in Chicago with the garage 20 feet across the back yard, that was like, you can't process that. And so we become dependent. And I think, honestly, that's by design.
It very well could cities. Be. Yep. Well, if you control your food, if you control your medical, if you control your money, they have complete control of a whole people group, really. And if you can self-sustain, if you can self-survive, if you can trade, you can make it possibly, if we ever get to that, post-apocalyptic world.
Right, right. Or even just between now and then, there will be some things that will probably happen that are intended to drive us more into that system of control, depending on them for medical money and, of course, the food supply, which is under the control of just a few corporations.
Correct.
When did what's the background of the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering? How did this come about?
So Rod Furno, he was selling hay, square
So
bales.
this is your father?
Correct. Yes. Okay. Yep. So, and he has a lot of new homesteaders. So people love to get a farm site. The first thing, they want to get some chickens, want to get some goats.
So people are coming to North Dakota to homestead.
People are coming to North Dakota to homestead, and they want to learn.
Wow.
And they had questions like, well, they didn't know they had to take care of the hoofs of a goat, or what do you feed them? You got little kitties now, and their eyes are all gunk shut. What's that from? And they had these questions, and they would ask Rod, and he'd be like, wouldn't it be nice if we could have a gathering of people that could share and network information to help each other? And we're not a for-profit. We're here to help people, to share information, and have a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And the one thing about is we're not just organic. We're for all types of farming, but there's some ways you can mix some things. And let's be honest, organic farming is just the way they used to do it in the past.
Again, what's considered new and cutting edge now in terms of organic, non-GMO preparedness. This is just real life, regular life of 100, 150 years ago.
Right. And, we had Dr. Maggie speaking today, and what a wealth of information of, food controls our moods, how we sleep. If we get enough sleep, not having enough sleep, what does that do for us? And some of the seminars on fermenting food, he was talking about the, sourdough bread. How amazing is that? That bread is actually breaking down, the process actually breaks down the gluten. Everybody's talking about gluten
intolerance.
Yes.
Right.
And so it's like, why didn't those people have those issues back then? I always question that. You didn't read about that in the Bible, right?
Right.
So, well, you do it the right way, you don't have the issues. So the yeast that we get today is kind of a modified yeast to act faster. It's a faster process, and everything today is bleached, faster, chemical.
Right. And so, just going back to the way things used to be done, getting closer, dare I say, to the biblical model or the biblical way of life.
Oh, right.
Is actually healthier.
Absolutely, and there's so many things out of the Old Testament that they had right. What they ate, what not to eat. And it doesn't mean it depends on your theology if you should eat things today or not eat things today. But there was some really good reasoning. We probably shouldn't have been eating some of those foods.
So how did you get the word out? I mean, so what did Rod do in order to get the word out and say, hey, let's get a bunch of people together?
So he got together with some folks, and it's been networking and people growing. And our advisory board and actual board has grown to about 20 people. So started with Rod, now it's grown to be about 20 people that all have this same desire to share information, to help neighbors. There's two different types of people in the world. There's people that want to help people, and there's people that want to profit off of people. And you look at the world today, and even in the universities, what do they teach? Well, who's donating the money for them to teach those reasons? Maybe I'm saying that the wrong way, but who's funding this?
Right.
It seems like the world runs.
Or as the ancient Romans used to say, "Qui bene," who benefits?
Yes. And this is a world of greed, and the person with the most money is the one that's sharing the most information. This is how you should do this. This is how you should do that. This is what you eat. So at the end of the day, who's even in government? Who's buying this official? Who's buying this university?
Right.
What are we going to teach?
So this is a sort of a reaction to that, then just regular people coming together and sharing knowledge, information, and a lot of homemade products here.
Yeah, fantastic. We got Roister's meat over here from Medina, North Dakota.
Goodness. Yeah.
And that is some good stuff. We got organic homemade dog treats over here. We got rugs. We got people making things out of antlers. Behind us, we got a lot
the
of
dog shoes made out of antler.
Yes, fantastic idea.
Yeah.
We have some patches over here. They have a little bit of copper, things like that. I'm actually wearing some right now. I think they're called X95 patches. I mean, it's some really fantastic stuff, and this stuff works. So it's been a good show.
Now,
of
on
sharing.
The copper in that, is that like an arthritis type thing?
It can be. I take a magnesium and zinc. Well, when you take those supplements, it depletes your copper. Don't take my word for it. Research it yourself.
Okay.
But so I think those patches have a little bit of copper. I've seen people wear copper bracelets.
I know my dad did because he had rheumatoid arthritis, and he
Right.
said it helped.
It does, and
Yeah.
that was new to me. So I'm learning stuff about that. So.
Huh. Okay. I'm getting in that age where the arthritis is starting to become, noticeable enough. So, maybe looking into that. I also noticed heirloom seeds.
Yes. We've got people here teaching us about organic seeds and what you gain by using those organic seeds and how to garden. Everybody thinks they're a professional garden, but it doesn't hurt to learn some new things, in soil biology and cover crops. We have a George from the sheriff's department. He's down here teaching on self-defense.
Right.
Let's say you have to use your constitutional right to defend yourself.
Right.
What happens next?
Yes.
What do you
yes.
say? We learned some great things, like you have somebody coming at you with a knife. How many feet away do you have reaction time? Something I didn't know. I think 21 feet away is a long time. He says, no,
Yeah.
they'll get you in 21 feet with a knife.
Yeah. It's and that is something I think most Americans, again, especially if you're raised in a big city, trained and conditioned to depend on the police for that sort of thing.
Right.
And I'm sorry, the police aren't there to prevent; they're there to investigate and apprehend after the fact.
Yeah.
But when you live in rural America, as you do, as we do now, you don't even have. I mean, they're not going to get there in time. If you've got a home invader, you
right.
need to know what to do.
Yep.
This is really. For me, been a lot of fun because as I mentioned, my grandparents farmed up here in North Dakota. So we didn't get up here as often as I would have liked. It was really a change coming from Chicago to a farm of a couple hundred acres in the middle of North Dakota, where you could see like the horizon is like forever out there.
Right.
You don't get that in a city because you get too many buildings and trees.
Right.
Seeing things here that remind me. So the older I get, the more emotional I get. Just like I'm going to have to figure out how to pack a couple of jars of jam, choke cherry.
Yes.
We don't get choke cherry in the Ozarks, or at least not that I've seen. Maybe I just haven't been looking hard enough. But I know my grandmother used to make choke cherry jelly all the time. We'd always come home to Chicago with choke cherry jelly and rhubarb. Grandma was she was the master with rhubarb, which my mom inherited. So again, I've got some strawberry rhubarb I'm coming home with as well. But it strikes me that these people, for the most part, I can't say that there's any one of the exhibitors here that's doing this because it's a career. Yes, maybe they've got it set up where they're making a little money on the side doing this. But it seems to me that all of these people are doing this because it's a labor of love.
You know what? No one on our board or here that are helping with the seminars are doing it for a profit. We're doing this, like you said, neighbors helping neighbor, a labor of love, you could say this. Yep. And that's a great thing about having you here because, you are an expert that is surrounded by experts. And, it's so fun to talk to somebody, like I've read Michael Heiser's works. I've studied your stuff forever. And, 2 years ago or 3 years ago when you were going to come, we talked about all those great theologians we lost right around that COVID time. And I remember having that conversation with you. We had lost Pastor Nash from the AFLC, super, super good pastor. And you had lost a couple of your really good friends around that time too. But
Chris Putnam, Rob Skiba.
Yes. And, these pastors all watch each other and they learn from each other. So one thing that it's fun about you, Derek, is you get to be around all these experts and you're kind of a sponge for all this great information. And I tell you what, folks, if you didn't make it last night, that was probably the most amazing seminar. I'm not buttering Derek up because he's right here. I'm saying in truth, that was probably one of the greatest seminars I've ever seen, packed with so much information about the past, current events, and what's happening today.
Well, thank you very much. I gathered from looking at previous years, you've had other pastors, you've had other evangelists come and speak.
Yes.
Well, why did you want to include that aspect in what some might look at as a homesteading seminar, a homesteading demonstration or workshop?
Well, I think anything not focused or centered around God is worthless. I think God should be included in everything. And it's just fantastic. There's a lot of people in the world that think, that thing that they saw was great grandpa. That spook in the night's just a just a ghost and we should communicate with these things. But the Bible tells us something completely different. These, around Halloween, you got, and I can't say, what a ghost is versus a demon. And maybe we can talk about that tonight. But, sometimes people are meddling with things they shouldn't be doing, and it's showed as fun, like Ouija boards. Looking into the crystal ball, contacting spirits. And the Bible's pretty clear. Those are things we should really stay away from. And these entities have been around forever. They're a lot smarter than us. Yeah. They've been around a long time, and they know what they're doing. And they're not really things that we should meddle with as people. Yeah. Definitely as Christians. So you got a lot of shows out there, and they're kind of romancing the idea of contacting spirits and things like that. And at the end of the day, you read a lot of those testimonies, and they're not happy endings with folks that get involved with that.
Right. It's how important is faith when you are farming, when you are living off the land?
Well, I think faith is very important,
and I guess I should be more specific rather than just faith, because that's a word that's thrown around a lot, even by people who say, well, I'm spiritual but not religious, which is just a cop-out of saying, I don't really want to think too hard about what I believe.
Right.
Faith in Jesus Christ. How important is that when you are farming?
I think it's very important. I don't personally farm, but I used to work at a company a few years ago, and my general manager, he was a phenomenal.
But you have some livestock, though.
I do have some. Well, I got guinea hens.
Ah, okay.
I guess we could call those. They eat wood ticks like crazy, so they're a good bird to have around.
Yes.
They're loud. Some people, they're kind of like a guard dog. If somebody comes in the yard that they don't recognize, they will make a commotion. So some people don't like them, but I'm one of those different people that do like them. But no, I think faith is very important. For to be able to talk to, let's say, your neighbor or your general manager or anybody about faith and talk about the Bible and things like that. I think we've become a culture who's almost a cowardice about talking about faith, because everybody's so worried. Are you going to offend somebody? Don't say Jesus' name. And some people, you start talking about faith, or you start talking about Jesus Christ, their face gets red and they get nervous, and you can say, okay.
I was that guy 30 years ago.
Yep, I was too. But the more you talk and the more you share, then you meet other friends and they have the same thoughts, and they're studying the Bible. There's nothing better than running into somebody that's read the Bible, so you can visit. It's a rather boring conversation if it's just one-sided about the Holy Word of God.
Yeah, especially if they're like, giving you the look that they're really wanting to get out of the conversation,
making those two steps away every.
Right. My dad, as he got older, said that he realized it was not. That it was really foolish not to have those important conversations. And I think it's just natural that as you get older, you start thinking more deeply about things. You start taking a longer view. And maybe God designed us that way. When you're young, you think you're going to live forever. And so you don't think about the long-term consequences of your decisions and your actions. And as you get older, you do. And hopefully for your sake, it doesn't require something traumatic to change the course of your thinking in your life. But sometimes it does. Again, the reason I asked the question about farming is it just struck me that when you're really depending on things like the weather, you have to have a certain amount of faith. It's like, well, it's all going to work out. But it also involves some planning and some wisdom. And I think that was the way God originally intended for humanity to live. Here's this wonderful garden called Earth that I've given you. Take dominion of it. Shepherd it, care for it, tend it, nurture it, and it will, that this is our inheritance. And I think the whole narrative of the Bible is about the fallen realm trying to deprive us of our inheritance.
That's right. And to sometimes make us forget that the devil's even out there, right?
Sure.
And
it's like that saying from the movie The Usual Suspects: the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is convincing the world he doesn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. And you're right, because we're going to live forever. It's just a matter of where you're going to live forever. And that's, you and I visited a little bit on emails and stuff, but really with faith, if you're born into a faith, why not look at other faiths? How can you really believe? Maybe your great-great-grandfather has you in that denomination because that was the only church in that town at the time.
Yeah.
I think if you're a Baptist, check out the Lutherans. If you're a Lutheran, check out the Catholic. If you're a Catholic, check out the Seventh-day Adventist. If you're a Presbyterian, check out the Methodist. why not question those things? But you got to read the Bible first.
Right.
And so many people today, they sit in the pews and they're listening what's coming from the pulpit, and they can have 3 different pastors in 20 years, and they can say different things, and they don't even catch it because they're not biblically grounded.
Right. And a lot of us, and again, 30 years ago, I was that guy. You know, you pay attention as much as you can on Sunday morning, and then the rest of the week, it's like you just kind of set it on the shelf and take it out again when you go back to church next Sunday morning.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
How has the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering changed? This is what, the 6th year?
The 5th year, we missed one because of COVID.
Gotcha. Okay. So how has it changed since the first year?
You know, we're a variety show, so we have a lot of different things, but I can't really say like what changed. We have different speakers. We try to bring back the ones that people really like self-sufficiency. People really like that. You know, we have a wide variety of vendor booths. We kind of mix stuff up. This year, it's free to get into the vendors, so we really wanted to help promote those vendors, have people come in, buy stuff. Maybe they didn't want to they weren't interested in some of the seminars, but come on in, buy some stuff, spend some money here. You know, check out the Eagles, maybe get a really good meal, or go over to Roysters and get a really good brat.
Oh yeah, and I can vouch for the cheddar bratwurst. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's right.
Sharon is very interested in the Four Horsemen bratwurst, which is what the jalapeno, habanero, ghost pepper, and there's one other that I can't remember. But
I like hot food, and that was a heater. So I had a little bit this morning. So
yeah, I know. Thad said it was pretty hot, not something he'd want to have for breakfast ever again.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing gathering here. What kind of do you have folks that come back for all of these events?
Yes, and we have people that the people that show up will come back again and again and again. And this year was kind of tough. We had our first ice storm, I guess you would call it. So we had about 2 inches of ice on the roadways kind of throughout, and it's been kind of a bummer for driving. And it was slippery. I live about an hour away, and I was driving about 30 to 40 miles an hour to get here. Mm-hmm. But that's the way it is in North Dakota. We're used to it.
Yeah. No, I was raised in the Chicago area. The first day I went out for driver's ed in high school, we had just gotten ½ inch of ice. And the coach said, look, because it was the coach of the football team, or basketball team was the driver's ed teacher. If you don't learn how to drive on this, you'll never go anywhere between like March and from like November to March. But I think in North Dakota, it'd be like October through April if you don't learn how to drive on it back then.
Right.
This is a really organic feel to it.
It is.
And again, I was telling Thad that we live about an hour from Branson, and so you get a lot of craftsmen who basically have made an entire business out of producing stuff for Branson. Some of the shops down there, their stuff that looks handmade is when you look at the back of the card, it says "Made in China." I have not seen anything like that here. This all looks like it's homemade, handmade, and as I said before, a labor of love.
You know, it's so funny because I love hats. I like being patriotic and trying to find a hat with a flag on it, right? And every hat I ordered, made in China, made in Singapore. I couldn't find a flag or a hat with American flag on it, made in the USA anywhere. And I'm sure there are some spots out there. Maybe somebody will comment or put something on it where you can find a good hat like that. But you know, we also have bluegrass music. And we got John Andrews. He's got kids coming, learning how to play the banjo.
I saw a young lady look like she was maybe 9-10 years old over there playing the fiddle. Like
he gets them going right away.
Grand Ole Opry. I mean, it was amazing.
So you know, John Andrews kind of came into this too because Rod was doing banjo lessons with John, and they were old friends. And he's like, I got an idea for a show of neighbors helping neighbors and learning and sharing information. Would you like to be part of that? And John said, yeah, and it's been history ever since.
Wow. So what do you hope people go home from the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering? What do you hope they take away from this event?
Well, we are a educational show. So our goal is to educate, help, and give people a different option. We're not saying it's the best option. We're not saying we're right, but we're saying there's other ways to cook, to eat, to eliminate stress in your life, to take care of your goats. We have Lee Mansky teaching people how grazing practices. You know, we have people that are interested in showing how to save things like butterflies. You know, I remember somebody telling me a story once, and I can't remember who it was. I'm pretty sure I can remember the name, but he said he was spraying out in a field, and he before he realized it, he came across a little Bambi, right? all curled up. So the spray boom went across that animal. The next pass around, that animal is dead. And I think people are missing it. I think being green is good. You know, recycling, keeping the land clean. I think that's all good. But there's other ways I think that we're missing. And I think the people that really have the money in the world kind of push what being green is. And usually at the end of the day, somebody's making a profit off that green idea. And, you know, there's ways to, you know, not poison our rivers, not kill all the butterflies.
Yeah.
And there should be ways and leaders out there that are going to push things that are going to help the environment, but still make it manageable for everybody to make a living, make sure we have enough food for everyone. And maybe those are some ideas that this show talks about, but we also have things on conventional stuff too. So
Where can people find out more about it? I presume you guys are going to do this again next year?
yes, that is our plan.
Yeah.
So right now you can go to Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering spot. We are going to have a web page up and running or something to that effect. And hopefully we can keep a relationship with you in the future too. So maybe some stuff on Derek Gilbert House but yeah.
So the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering spot is on Facebook.
That is on the Facebook.
All right.
Yep.
Well, there will be a link in the show notes below this video or audio if you're listening only, and you can check on that there. You'll see some pictures from this year's gathering, pictures from previous year's gathering. It's really a diverse group. Everything from homemade jams and jellies to heirloom seeds to bird watching to and of course Reisters.
Reisters
meats.
Medina, North Dakota. He might even ship it out in the mail. I don't know.
Yeah, they said that they've shipped to just about every continent on Earth except maybe Antarctica. But yeah, he said they recently sent an order to Kosovo, believe it or not. So yeah, from a little town in North Dakota all over the world. As my mother is very proud to say, if it wasn't for North Dakota, you wouldn't have any sandwiches because of the wheat that's grown up here.
Or honey.
Or honey.
I think we're the #1 honey producer.
Really?
And we got some honey over here.
I
That they're selling.
tasted some of that.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
Yep. They actually have their own hives. They're from Verona, North Dakota.
So yeah. So remember North Dakota. Yes, it is a real place. I know that geography is not taught as well in our high schools and grammar schools as it used to be. It is a real place that really exists. One of the 57 states in the union, according to our former president.
And we are not part of Canada.
That's right. Wyatt, thank you for having me here
Thank you
today.
for coming.
It's been a delight. Details, news, and update on the Skywatch TV Defender virtual conference and more coming up as A View from the Bunker continues.
If you're in the Dakotas or Minnesota, I encourage you to keep your eyes open next October for next year's Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering, Neighbors Helping Neighbors. What a concept. I had a wonderful time, came home with some choke cherry jelly and some strawberry rhubarb jam. Choke cherry, not something I've had since the last time we visited my grandparents in North Dakota, and that was in 1978. So a wonderful weekend. Really enjoyed my time there. And I will put links in the notes, by the way, to the two presentations that I gave, because Wyatt was thinking and put a video camera up, which is his iPhone, which frankly is what we use for our cameras here in the barn now. And recorded both of the presentations. So I'll put those in the notes below. And coming up, some thoughts on what is going on in Israel right now, including a woman in Indianapolis who tried to respond in her own way and managed to mess up her own anti-Semitic hate crime. Bless her pointed little head. That is straight ahead as A View from the Bunker continues.
Hi, everybody. Believe it or not, this is October, and that means you get a brand new GHTV special offer.
We're approaching Halloween, the time of year when the world around us is focused on ghosts and goblins and devils and demons.
But they're real.
They're real, and we'd like to give you good information about those entities with our October special. First, our book Veneration, where we analyze the ancient cult of the Nephilim, the origin of demons exposed in this book. Vicki Joy Anderson's important book, They Only Come Out at Night, about night terrors and sleep paralysis.
You need this book at home for your kids and grandkids. Trust me, it is a great book.
And 7 hours of audio interviews with the late Dr. Michael Heiser about the nature of the unseen realm.
Oh, this is a collector's disc.
It really is. Altogether, these 3 items purchased separately worth $65 during the month of October, just $35 plus shipping and handling. Take advantage of this because this is good, solid, scholarly information, especially the content from Dr. Heiser.
It is, and particularly this month, you want to be armed with the truth when your family asks, what about witches? What about wizards? What about these things at Halloween? What do we do with this? It's a time to teach.
Absolutely. Take advantage of our October special offer. Veneration, they only come out at night, and The Unseen Adversary, yours for just $35 plus shipping and handling only at gilberthouse.org/store. Talking the Walk every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at VFTB.net. You'll also find us at gilberthouse.org, on YouTube, youtube.com @Gilbert House. And if you're watching there, please take a moment, subscribe, and share with your friends. And then please download our free mobile app, which makes sure that we will never be canceled. Why? Because at some point, especially if this conflict drags on or something else pops up that requires some political commentary, I may say something that violates the terms of service. Not intentionally. We don't do this to be flamboyant or just to sensationalize the news or anything like that. But it is their playground. So please get our app, gilberthouse.org/app. You'll also find a link in the top menu bar at VFTB.net. That brings all of our content right to you. This program, our weekly broadcast program, Unraveling Revelation, the podcast that started at all PID Radio, and, of course, our weekly Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, which is really at the heart of everything that we do. All of that right in the palm of your hand, along with archives as time allows. We're going back and putting those back up there as well. We've got a bunch of stuff from 2005, 2006, including some of the very first interviews with men and women who have really influenced our walk, like Tom Horn, Mike Heiser, Chuck Mister, L.A. Marzulli, and so on. And you'll find all of that in the app, gilberthouse.org/app. Well, as you know, of course, Israel has been at war since October 7th when Hamas launched that attack across the border from Gaza and murdered 1,400 Israeli civilians. The response by Israel has been intense. I mean, think about this from an American standpoint. Given that we've got 35 times the population, roughly, of Israel, what happened on that day is roughly equivalent to something like 40 or 50,000 Americans being killed in the span of one morning. That's more than the population of the county in which we live. You had best believe that there would be a unified call for a response. We're seeing this kind of unity. Aaron Lipkin, our friend in Samaria, which is part of what the world calls the West Bank, has told us that 6 weeks ago, Israel was a nation divided because of the push to rein in the judiciary in Israel. We've talked about that before. The judiciary in Israel is, we think of it as being activist here in the United States, but there is no constitution in Israel to rein in the power of the Supreme Court in Israel, which has the power under its laws to take up any law passed by the Knesset, their version of Congress, and decide whether it meets the test of reasonableness. Now, you don't need to be a legal scholar to know that that's a term that means different things to different people. And because of this, the liberal minority in Israel has managed to hold power over the conservative majority. Well, that division basically disappeared on the morning of October 7th. I don't think that was what Hamas intended. I don't think they were thinking that far ahead as to the consequences of their actions. But Israel is really united right now, and they are united in their desire to see Hamas completely obliterated. Now, sadly, because of the ideology, the religion of Hamas and the God that they serve, they are deliberately putting civilians in harm's way. Yes, I know there are people who say, well, that's Israeli propaganda. I'm sorry, it's not. There are independent journalists from Europe, the UK, who have seen these actions, seen these tunnels, and their proximity to schools, hospitals, mosques, churches. And they are deliberately placed there because they know that the Israelis will be constrained by worldwide public opinion from really going full force in those areas, and that is leading to some of the difficulty that the IDF has in planning its tactics on the ground in Gaza, because one false step where large numbers of civilians are killed inadvertently. And we're already seeing the tone from the Biden administration, which was full-throated support on October 8th, shifting now, where behind the scenes, the Biden administration has pushed Netanyahu to allow a humanitarian corridor, which is a good thing. We totally support this. Please believe me when I say that we have no desire to see any innocents killed in the crossfire. And sadly, there is really no way to avoid this in the nature of this conflict. But there was a story that came out this past week, reported by the Washington Free Beacon, that Israel contacted the United States, wanted to purchase a large quantity of M16 rifles because they saw what happened to unarmed civilians living in close proximity to Hamas. And the Biden administration apparently said, okay, but only if you guarantee that none of them will go to civilian outposts in Judea and Samaria. Again, what the world calls the West Bank. Now, according to the Washington Free Beacon, government officials speaking off the record said this is an unusual request, but it suggests that the Biden administration is giving into pressure from the left flank of the Democratic Party, which sees Israel as a whole, not just Israel in Judea and Samaria, but Israel as a whole as an occupying power who should be removed from the land. Well, we understand. Sharon and I make no apologies for supporting Israel and for the joy that we've felt in visiting the land of Israel since 2018 through our good friends Aaron and Eddie Lipkin Tours. They've made it possible for us to make 3 tours there. We're looking forward to our 4th, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments. But because there are questions that grow with each passing day as to whether or not we can hold the schedule for spring of 2024. And I understand that there are reasons to be judicious in our support of Israel. We do not confuse or conflate the geopolitical entity of Israel with God's chosen people. There is a spiritual Israel and a geopolitical entity called Israel, and like every other geopolitical entity on earth, it is ruled and controlled by flawed, sinful humans. Now, I am not one who believes that the church has replaced Israel. I do not subscribe to replacement theology. I think that is a dangerous theology that ultimately leads to anti-Semitism. It also leads to dominion theology, and the idea that since if you believe that the church has replaced Israel and Israel has no role to play in the end times, then we, the church, have no use for Israel except to move them out of the way because we're grafted in, so we're the new Israel. We do not subscribe to that. That is not scriptural. I mean, when you go back to the 2nd century, early church fathers, early church theologians like Hippolytus and Irenaeus believed that the Antichrist would come from the tribe of Dan. Now, setting aside the question of how there could be a tribe of Dan if there's no more Israel, let's just set that aside. It suggests that in the 2nd century, and the early 2nd century at that, okay, so we're talking less than 100 years after John wrote the book of Revelation, early church theologians, only 1 and 2 generations removed from the apostles, understood that the fulfillment of end times prophecy was still a future event. And John presumably was the one who taught Polycarp, from whom Irenaeus learned his theology. So you would assume then that the description in Revelation of the 144,000 witnesses pulled from the tribes of Israel would still be a future event. And I don't think even replacement people who do accept replacement theology, that the church has replaced Israel, would suggest that we Gentiles, we descendants of Japheth or Ham, would somehow be grafted in and become the new 12 tribes. I just don't see any scriptural support for that. So there's that aspect of it. If you believe that Israel is not the real Israel because the church has replaced Israel, I don't think you're on sound theological footing. If you don't believe Israel is the real Israel, or that the Jews in Israel are getting a little animated, the real Jews, because of something called the Khazarian Jew theory. This is the idea that in the 8th century AD, around 740 AD, the king of a Central Asian kingdom called Khazaria, and I forget the king's name, but around 740 AD, apparently the royal family of Khazaria, and this is a Turkic people. These are related to the Turks of today, related to the rulers of the Ottoman Empire. Other Turks today stretching from Western China through modern-day Turkey. The Khazarian ruling family, the royal family, converted to Judaism. Now, there's some question as to whether or not anyone else in the kingdom did. But as this theory was put forward by a fellow named Arthur Kessler, who wrote a book called The 13th Tribe back in 1976, he claimed that when the Khazarian kingdom collapsed in the 12th and 13th centuries, the Khazarian, who were now calling themselves Jews, moved west and settled in what is now Germany, Poland, the Baltic states and so forth, and became the Ashkenazi Jews, which make up a large percentage of the Jews in Israel today. So the idea then, the theory goes that support for Israel is misguided because it's not the real Jews in Israel. Our friend Chris White, who has done a number of what we lovingly call debunkumentaries, debunking things like David Icke, ancient aliens, and other things, other beliefs that just don't have any basis in history, did about an 18-minute video debunking the Khazarian Jew theory. In a nutshell, without going into all the details, in a nutshell, there's no serious historian who takes this theory seriously. There's no historical evidence to support the Khazarian Jew theory. Secondly, modern DNA research, recent DNA research, tracing the family name Cohen, the descendants of the Kohanim, the priestly class of Levites, shows that those who identify as Jews today, according to their DNA markers, originated in the Middle East, exactly where we find Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not Central Asia. There's no DNA evidence to support the theory. There's no historical evidence to support the theory. So sadly, the people who are buying into this as a reason to say, well, you shouldn't support Israel because they're not the real Jews, you just don't have a historic leg to stand on, no scientific leg to stand on, and no scriptural leg to stand on. But having said all of that, so what? What if they're not the real Jews according to your definition? Look in the bloodline of Jesus. The genealogy of Jesus has a Canaanite woman, Rahab, a Moabite woman named Ruth, presumably some other admixture in there throughout the generations. According to the Old Testament, if you were willing to accept the law of Moses, you were admitted into the family, as it were. But even setting that aside, because again, I think even that's irrelevant. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because I got some pushback last week as I just asked for prayer for a couple of friends of ours who've been called up into the reserves in Israel. These are men whom we personally know, spent a good deal of time with over the past few years, and especially this past March as we were there for about 3 weeks. These are men who are years past their peak fighting age, guys who would not normally be drafted into the military, men with wives, children, families, and they've been called up into the reserves, which suggests that Israel considers this a pretty serious event. Just simply asked for prayer for them, and got pushback because, well, Israel's satanic, was founded by the Illuminati and the Rothschilds, and it's controlled by the Khazarian mafia. Who cares? Who cares? I was just asking for prayer for my friends. And if that's your response, man, you need to recalibrate your moral compass. I'm sorry, but be blunt, but that's the way it is. Especially when you look at the reason that they've been called up. Yes, I know there have been years of bad blood between the Palestinian Arabs and the Israelis because this is the way things have been in that part of the world for literally thousands of years. When you start reading about the history of the tribal warfare that took place between the Amorites and the neighbors, and the Amorites and the Israelites and the Moabites and the Edomites and the Ammonites, they tend not to forgive. And when you read the history of Islam in particular over the last 14 centuries, I mean, they are still holding personal grudges for things that were done by the Crusaders 1,000 years ago. This is not an exaggeration. Friends of ours who traveled in Turkey told us of a friend of theirs, a Turk, who was showing them around, showed them some Roman public works project from 2,000 years ago that was damaged by the Crusaders in the 11th century, 1,000 years ago. And this fella was genuinely angry, saying he hoped they were burning in hell and that may Allah grant us the power to get revenge for some damage to a Roman aqueduct that his people didn't build. The only reason it's in their territory is because the Turks conquered it from the Eastern Roman Empire in the 15th century, but they still want revenge. This is not an isolated incident. This is the Muslim mindset, sadly. Now, we met wonderful Muslim Arabs in Israel when we were there and in Jordan. In fact, I will go so far as to say the staff of the hotels that we encountered this past trip to Jordan were friendlier and more helpful than the staffs in the Israeli hotels. I hope our Israeli friends don't take offense to that, but that was our experience this time. My point is that there are people all over the world who just want to live their lives peacefully with their neighbors, raise their children, enjoy their grandchildren, and not worry about, is there somebody going to sneak over the city wall tonight and try to shoot my wife and children while they sleep? Of course, you could say the same thing about some of our cities here in the United States these days. So I get that. I get that. There are bad people on both sides, and there always have been. I've also done a lot of reading on the early history of the United States, the very early post-colonial era when my European ancestors were moving down the Ohio River Valley, and obviously the American Indians didn't like that very much. My great-great-great-grandfather lost 2 brothers in the Indian Wars. There were atrocities committed on both sides. Not justifying it, just saying this is historic fact. But it is also a historic fact that the conflict in Gaza right now did not begin in 1973 or 1967 or 1948 or with Theodor Herzl and the Zionist movement of the late 19th century. This goes back literally millennia, because we are dealing with a supernatural conflict here. Principalities, powers, cosmic rulers over this present darkness. We pray for peace for all the innocents and non-combatants who are in harm's way. Both sides, all sides, and not just there, but also in Ukraine, in Yemen, wherever violence is taking place. But we also understand that peace will not come until our Lord and Savior appears in the heaven at the head of a heavenly army. Until that day, take every opportunity you have to share the hope you have in Jesus Christ with those around you, your family members, your friends, your colleagues, even through venues like this. The older I get, the less angry I try to be in these messages, because my doctrine is not 100% correct. So who am I to throw stones other than the essentials of the faith? There's only, one way to get to the Father, and that is through Jesus Christ. A lot of the non-essentials, Genesis 6, yeah, okay. I think it's really important to understanding proper theology, but you don't need to buy into that to accept the historic fact of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. To know that he died for your sins and rose again in accordance with the prophets on the 3rd day. We can deal with the non-essentials later. And until then, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for peace in Gaza pray that the non-combatants are supernaturally protected until this war comes to an end. Sadly, we see examples even here in these United States of, people who want to play a part in this conflict in some small way. As I'm recording this on Friday night, we don't know what's going to happen on Saturday. Last Saturday, of course, we saw anywhere between 100 and 300,000 people in Washington, D.C. descend on the White House. Tomorrow, November 11th, Veterans Day here in the United States, Remembrance Day in the UK, and I know that there are protests planned in London that may interrupt with the Remembrance Day celebration, and there are people who are not happy about that. The Metropolitan Police in London are going to have their hands full. We pray that violence does not break out, but sadly, this is a possibility as we're seeing this supernatural war escalate in other parts of the world. Now, we saw one woman try to take matters into her own hands and show her support for Hamas in Indianapolis last weekend. She was arrested by Indianapolis Metropolitan Police, who labeled the woman a terrorist. She is presumably of Middle Eastern origin. Her name is Ruba Almakhte, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it. So forgive me, I have not looked up the correct pronunciation of her name. 34-year-old woman arrested on a preliminary charge of criminal recklessness because she drove her car into a building that she thought was a Jewish school. This was last Friday night, about 11:30 p.m. local time, and officers called to investigate what was reported as a hate crime. She drove into the building, and she told this to police. She admitted this to police, said that she had been watching news coverage of the Israel-Hamas war and decided to plan an attack on this building because she was offended by a sign on the front of the building that identified it as Hebrew Israelite. Well, okay, Hebrew, bad, Israel, bad in her mind. So she decided to drive into the building, which she referred to as an Israelite school or an Israel school. Drove her car into the building with a couple of adults, several children inside. What she didn't realize is that the building, the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge, is a sect of an extreme sect, no less, of the Black Hebrew Israelites. The Black Hebrew Israelites are a sect who believe that the Jews in Israel are not the real Jews because real Jews are African in their minds. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, there was a street brawl that took place in downtown Chicago because Black Hebrew Israelites wanted to join the pro-Hamas protesters, and when they saw them coming with their Hebrew Israelite sign, they attacked, and it turned into a street fight. Same thing happened here in Indianapolis. The woman didn't do her due diligence on her homework, saw Hebrew Israelite on the school, on the front of the building, drove into it trying to hurt somebody, when in fact she was damaging a building owned by a group that hates the Jews as much as she apparently does. Bless her pointy little head. Well, a couple of things to pass along to you. Of course, with the passing of Dr. Tom Horn recently, the planned virtual conference for Skywatch TV has been postponed. That will likely be in the spring. Right now, I know we're going to record some programs on that this coming week at Skywatch TV, so we'll have details on the official launch date of the rescheduled virtual conference from Skywatch TV coming up in the next couple of weeks. This will be Tom Horn's last conference presentation. He had recorded it prior to his heart attack October 11th, so just releasing it this soon just seemed inappropriate. So we're pushing that off until the spring. I say we. I say that the team at Skywatch TV, Joe Horn, pushing that back until the spring. Now, also in the spring, we, of course, have our Israel tour planned for 2024, March 31st through April 9th. Timothy Alberino, our scheduled guest. Obviously, with the security situation in Israel right now, traveling there would just be impractical, but we've not made a final decision. At this point, we've not even really given serious consideration to alternate dates. We will look at the situation again in about 3 or 4 weeks And if it looks like things are continuing, the violence or the security situation doesn't look appropriate for a tour in the spring, we will produce a program. We will send emails to all of you who have signed up. We know that we've got at least one full busload already, and we've heard from a couple people who just wanted some clarity on this. Again, at this point, and we won't again announce it through this program, one of our podcasts. We'll do a special on this just to make clear and get the information out. But at this point, we are still praying that things will wrap up soon and that the security situation will be safe enough that we can return to Israel and do that on schedule. But again, if that changes, we will let you know before we get to the Christmas holiday. If that takes place, then we may actually be able to attend the Hear the Watchman conference coming up the first weekend in April in Dallas. This will be at the Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center. Signs in the Heavenlies is the theme because that's the weekend of the total eclipse coming through the United States, and Dallas will be one of the places to see it. I had agreed to contribute a video presentation, but if we're not going to Israel, then I'll see if we can talk Mike Kerr and Jeannie Moore into inviting Sharon and I to attend in person because we love getting together with the Hear the Watchman crowd. But there's information on that, as with all things, at our app. Just look under the calendars section at our app or at the website gilberthouse.org or vftb.net. We try to post our upcoming events everywhere that we can. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen to this program. I don't know how the green screen behind me is going to turn out. We're just doing a sort of proof of concept as we're still tweaking things here in our barn. This is the new studio set arrangement setup that you have made possible for us, and we are truly thankful for that. Just thought I'd try it. I mean, we bought these on sale. You know, the green screen and the frame behind it were special deals at the place where you get all of our equipment. It's one of those, like, don't know how we're going to use it, but this price is too good to pass up. So anyway, proof of concept. Probably won't see this again next week, especially if it doesn't look good right now. We'll find out in the production. But again, thank you for taking time out to watch or listen wherever that is. If you're listening, of course, you can always subscribe to the podcast at vftb.net or Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. Our announcer is the inimitable DC Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We do this because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.